Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Azizah Nurul Aisy, and in this video, I'm going to read my cultural studies resume about chapter 3, culturalism. Culturalism. A. Richard Hogarth, the uses of literacy. The uses of literacy is divided into two parts. First, an older order, describing the working class culture of Hogarth's childhood in the 1930s, and yielding place to new, describing a traditional working class culture under threat from the new forms of mass entertainment of the 1950s. According to Hogarth, working class people have traditionally, or at least for several generations, regarded art as escape, as something enjoyed, but not assumed to have much connection with the matter of daily life. Art is marginal, fun. Real life goes on elsewhere. Art is for you to use. He describes the aesthetic of the working class as an overriding interest in the plus detail of the everyday, a profound interest in the already known, taste for culture that shows rather than explores. The first half of the uses of literacy consists mostly of examples of communal and self-made entertainment. The analysis is often considered in considerable advance of Levicism. The idea of an audience appropriating for its own purposes, on its own terms, the commodities offered to it by the culture industries is never fully explored, but the idea is there in Hogarth, again indicating the underexploited sophistication of parts of the uses of literacy, too often dismissed as a rather unacademic and nostalgic semi-autobiography. The real weakness of the book is its inability to carry forward the insights from its treatment of the popular culture of the 1930s into its treatment of the so-called mass culture of the 1950s. Again, this reminds us that Hogarth's target is mostly the producers of the commodities from which popular culture is made, and not those who make these commodities or not into popular culture. Hogarth, however, does not totally despair at the march of mass culture. He knows, for instance, that the working class are not living lives which are imaginatively as poor as a mere reading of their literature would suggest. Hogarth's approach to popular culture has much in common with the approach of Levicism. Both operate with a notion of cultural decline. Both see education in discrimination as a means to resist the manipulative appeal of mass culture. However, what makes his approach different from that of Levicism is his detailed preoccupation with, and above all, his clear commitment to working class culture. B. Raymond Williams, The Analysis of Culture. Raymond Williams' influence on cultural studies has been enormous. The range of his work alone is formidable. He has made significant contributions to our understanding of cultural theory, cultural history, television, the press, radio, and advertising. In the analysis of culture, Williams outlines the three general categories in the definition of culture. First, there is the ideal in which culture is a state or process of human perfection in terms of certain absolute or universal values. Second, there is the documentary record, the surviving texts and practices of a culture. Third, There is the social definition of culture, in which culture is a description of a particular way of life. This definition introduces three new ways of thinking about culture. First, the anthropological position, which sees culture as a description of a particular way of life. Second, the proposition that culture expresses certain meanings and values. Third, the claim that the work of cultural analysis should be the clarification of the meanings and values implicit and explicit in a particular way of life, particular culture. Taken together, the 3 points embodied in the social definition of culture. Culture as a particular way of life, culture as expression of a particular way of life, and cultural analysis as a method of reconstituting a particular way of life, establish both the general perspective and the basic procedures of culturalism. Lived culture is a culture as experienced by people in their day-to-day existence in a particular place and at a particular moment in time. The only people who have full access to this culture are those who actually live its structure of feeling. Once the historical moment is gone, the structure of feeling begins to fragment. Williams' analysis breaks with Levicism in a number of ways. First, there is no special place for art. It is a human activity alongside other human activities. Art is there as an activity with the production, the trading, the politics, the raising of families. In culture and society, he distinguishes between middle-class culture as the basic individualist idea and the institutions, manners, habits of thought, and intentions which proceed from that, and working class culture as the basic collective idea and the institutions, manners, habits of thought, and the intention which proceed from this. He takes seriously Levy's call for a common culture, but the difference between Levicism and Williams on this point is that Williams does want a common culture, whilst Levicism wants only a hierarchical culture of difference and difference, although he still claims to recognize how bad most popular culture is. This is no longer a judgment made from within an enchanted circle of certainty, policed by the older formula enlightened minority, degraded mass. C. E.P. Thompson, The Making of English Working Class. The English working class, like any class, is for Thompson, is a historical phenomenon. It is not a structure or a category, but the coming together of a number of disparate and seemingly unconnected events, both in the raw material of experience and in consciousness. It is something which in fact happens and can be shown to happen in human relationships. Class is for Thompson, then a social and cultural formation arising from processes which can be studied as they work themselves out over a considerable historical period. The Making of the English Working Class details the political and cultural formation of the English working class by approaching its subject from 3 different but related perspectives. First, it reconstructs the political and cultural traditions of English radicalism in the late 18th century, religious dissent, popular discontent, and the influence of the French Revolution. Second, it focuses on the social and cultural experience of the Industrial Revolution as it was lived by different working groups: weavers, field laborers, cotton spinners, artisans, and etc. Finally, it analyzes the growth of working class consciousness, evidenced in the corresponding growth in a range of political, social, and cultural, strongly based and self-conscious working class institutions. The making of the English working class is the classic example of history from below. Thompson's aim is to place the experience of the English working class as central to any understanding the formation of an industrial capitalist society in the decades leading up to the 1830s. The making of the English working class is in so many ways a monumental contribution to social history. Thompson's history is not one of abstract economic and political processes, nor is it an account of the doings of the great and the worthy. The book is about ordinary men and women, their experiences, their values, their ideas, their actions, their desires, in short, popular culture as a site of resistance to those in whose interest the Industrial Revolution was made. B. Stuart Hall and Paddy Warnell, the popular arts. The main thesis of the popular arts is that in terms of actual quality, the struggle between what is good and worthwhile and what is shoddy and debased is not a struggle against the modern forms of communication, but a conflict within these media. In this task, they pay specific thanks to the work of Hogarth and Williams, and passing thanks to the key figures of Levicism. The book was written against a background of concern about the influence of popular culture in the school classroom. Part of the aim of the popular arts then is to replace the misleading generalizations of earlier attacks on popular culture by helping to facilitate popular discrimination within and across the range of popular culture itself. Instead of worrying about the effects of popular culture, we should be seeking to train a more demanding audience. Their approach leads them to reject two common teaching strategies often encountered when popular culture is introduced into the classroom. First, there is the defensive strategy that introduces popular culture in order to condemn it as second-rate culture. Second, there is the opportunist strategy that embraces the popular tastes of students in the hope of eventually leading them to better things. The second part of their thesis, the necessity to recognize within popular culture a distinct category that they call popular art. Popular art is not art that has attempted and failed to be real art, but art that operates within the confines of the popular. As they explain, popular art is essentially a conventional art which restates, in an intense form, values and attitudes already known, which measures and reaffirms, but bring to this something of the surprise of art as well as the shock of recognition. Such art has in common with folk art the genuine contact between audience and performer, but it differs from folk art in that it is an individualist art, the art of the non-performer. The audience as community has come to depend on the performer's skill and on the force of a personal style to articulate its common values and interpret its experiences. One problem with their distinction between art and popular art is that it depends for its clarity on art as surprise, but this is art as defined in modernist terms. They make a further distinction to include mass art. There is a popular art, good and bad, and there is art, good and not so good. And there is mass art. Mass art is a corrupt version of popular art. Rather than confront the mass culture critique, they seek to privilege certain of the texts and practices of popular culture and thus remove them from the condemnation the critics of mass culture. They claim that once the distinction between popular and mass art has been made, we find we have bypassed the cruder generalizations about mass culture and are faced with the full range of material offered by the media. The main focus of the popular arts is on the textual qualities of popular culture. However, when Hall and Wano turns to questions of youth culture, they find it necessary to discuss the interaction between text and audience. E. The Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies. In the introduction to the Long Revolution, Williams regrets the fact that there is no academic subject within which the questions I'm interested in can be followed through. I hope one day there might be. 3 years after the publication of these comments, Hogarth established the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies at the University of Birmingham. Culturalists study cultural texts and practices in order to reconstitute or reconstruct the experiences, values, etc. The structure of feeling of particular groups or classes or whole societies in order to better understand the lives of those who live the culture. However, research at the center quickly brought culturalism into complex and often contradictory and conflictual relations with imports of French structuralism. In turn, bringing the two approaches into critical dialogue with developments in Western Marxism, especially the work of Louis Althusser and Antonio Gramsci. That's all about my resume. Thank you for watching.